A big day for Texans. 666 new laws taking effect today. Hannah Rucker joins us now from the newsroom with some of the biggest new laws you need to know about before you head out the door. Hannah, good morning.
Hi, good morning to you, Rob. I know you hear that number, over 600 new laws, a little overwhelming. Don't worry, we're going to break down some of the main highlights to keep in mind today. A big one today will be the homeless camping ban, and of course something we're familiar with here in Austin. It'll apply to the entire state, though, where people can face a fine of up to $500. Cities cannot opt out of the ban. Of course, here in Austin, we've already been going through the phases of Prop B, but for other Texas cities, this will be the first-time ban for them. And another big one will allow any Texan who is eligible and over 21 years old to buy a handgun to carry one without a license or training. This has been interesting. Austin Interim Police Chief Joseph Chacon has been very vocal against this law, saying that he feels it'll be very crucial to make sure these new gun owners take some type of safety course. And another controversial bill is the Texas Heartbeat Bill. We've heard a lot about this the past couple months. It outlaws abortions as soon as a fetal heartbeat is detected, before they know they're pregnant. Now, the safety concern from local providers with this is that they believe people will still find a way to have abortions.
It's the women with the least resources among the most vulnerable and marginalized communities who cannot meet this mandate and will not be able to travel out of state to access what has been for 50 years a right, a constitutional right in this country.
So a lot of pushback with some of these laws here. Other providers are trying to get the U.S. Supreme Court to halt that heartbeat bill from becoming law. They haven't been successful at that yet. Another big one today is the expanding of medical marijuana, which we will talk a little bit more about later in the show. Rob, back to you.
So many things changing. All right, effective today. Hannah, thank you. There's another controversial bill that could soon become law. It took 2 special sessions, but lawmakers have passed the election reform bill. It's on its way to the governor's desk. This measure bans things like 24-hour voting and drive-through voting. It also limits how election officials can send out mail-in ballot applications, and it gives partisan poll watchers free movement inside polling places. During the first special session, Democrats fled the state for weeks to block this bill, saying it will suppress voters, but Republicans say it'll make it easier to vote.
Look, did you know there was a government-funded education grant that could...
Are they banning any teacher?
The Texas Senate has passed a bill that could limit what is taught in the classroom. Under Senate Bill 3, public schools are no longer required to teach that the Ku Klux Klan, slavery, or white supremacy are morally wrong. Also dropped from the curriculum is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, writings from Cesar Chavez and Susan B. Anthony, and Native American history. Who knew that this campaign against CRT was not entirely on the up and up?
Democratic strategist and SVP at Firehouse Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins, and senior policy analyst of the Independent Women's Forum, Kelsey Bowler, are with us to weigh in. Great to see you guys.
Good morning.
So, Michael, I, for one, am shocked. I was so sure that when Texas Republicans were taking up the banner of opposition to critical race theory, that they had dived deeply into that theory, and they had found some flaws with it that they wanted to see corrected before it started molding the minds of Texas's school children. Yet the Texas Senate seems to have taken it a bit further than we originally thought. What happened here?
Look, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a whitewashing of history that's going on. And it's not just bad for politics, but it's bad for the country as a whole, because we no longer have shared truths. And when we don't have shared truths, we end up with things like January 6th. We end up with people having no faith in the government and no real understanding of how we got to where we are. We can't wipe away slavery. We can't wipe away what happened to Native Americans and ever expect to have reconciliation. And I think at the end of the day, that's the real problem.
So, Kelsey, I'm looking at the text of the bill now, and there's a section in there that says, nothing in the section may be construed as limiting the teaching or instruction of essential knowledge. But then it does say, in adopting these essential knowledge and skills, these documents shall be included in someone's civic education, and it goes to list them. It includes everything from Alexis de Tocqueville to the reading of the Federal Civil Rights Act, Declaration of Independence, the complexity of the historic relationship between Texas and Mexico. So what is your take on kind of what's going on here?
Yeah, let's talk about what actually happened here and whether the framing of this entire segment is accurate or responsible. This was based on a Huffington Post news report claiming that Republicans are dropping the teaching that the KKK is morally wrong. Is that what they're actually doing? Are they banning any teacher from teaching their children that the KKK is wrong? Absolutely not. What happened here is that normal legislative process, a state Democrat lawmaker introduced an amendment to this anti-CRT bill, and that amendment said you must teach that the KKK is morally wrong. Republicans dropped that amendment, and this is something that happens in any legislative process. Any responsible journalist knows this is typical, where opposing lawmakers know they really have no chance of attaching certain provocative amendments to legislative packages, but they'll do so anyways so that they get bad press. But the truth of the matter is that any responsible journalist knows that's not actually what happened here, and that's why you only see the Huffington Post framing it like this. If you Google this story in any other responsible news outlet, they are not suggesting that Republican lawmakers in Texas are trying to whitewash our history and ban Texas schools from teaching that the KKK is wrong.
Well, so I'm curious for your take on this. The KKK part aside, if somebody introduces a trolling amendment that says that you should say something obvious in your classroom, then just say the obvious thing. I think the more interesting point is what Rachel said, is that it doesn't ban you from talking about the I Have a Dream speech if you're a teacher, but it took it from being on the curriculum and taking it off of the curriculum. So now it's up to the teacher whether or not they're going to talk about that. But what were you going to say?
Well, I was actually just going to see if kind of Michael wanted to respond to that, because we do see this all the time, right? In legislative environments, poison pill amendments, getting people on the record to, vote against inflammatory things are then spun into, well, you're against this and you're against that. So I guess kind of, Michael, what's your take? Because the added element we have here is that the chamber can't even debate this right now because Texas Democrats aren't even providing a quorum. So kind of talk to me about your take on, how you see this playing out. Is this a legislative process writ large, or is what we're seeing actually going to be the final result?
Well, let me first say that this isn't the first time we've had this issue in the South. The Civil War was defined in textbooks as the war of northern aggression. Like, we've seen this playbook before. And so as Republicans continue to attack critical race theory as if elementary schools are teaching it rather than graduate schools and law schools, we run into this conundrum where both sides are trying to now use history and use education as this political cudgel, when it shouldn't. At its most basic level, we need to have unified facts that we start from the beginning and raise children understanding so that we can have basic conversations. What we've done now is make everything political, even 5, 7-year-olds trying to learn how the country was formed.
Kelsey, what I'm curious about is what